What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Johnny Mack here. Just wanted to give you a heads up that if you are looking for a community that is open to discussion as far as mentorship, conservation, the wild, becoming a better person, and all of that, there is a group for you on Facebook, and it is called Soul Seekers. Soul Seekers, we are all about making ourselves a better person. We're all about making sure hunting lasts for generations to come and encouraging people to get plugged in. Whether you are someone who has something to give or someone who needs to soak it up like a sponge, this is a community for you, and I strongly encourage you that if you're on Facebook to join Soul Seekers, and if you're not on Facebook, hop on there just for that group. It is only going to be as powerful as we all make it. And so just remember that life happens for you, it doesn't happen to you, and that you can't outgive good. You can't outgive good, people. I want you to understand that, and I want you to believe it, because when we believe that and we lead with courage and we lead with intention, lives are changed, lives are transformed, just like on this podcast, transformation through primal adventure. Be blessed. Enjoy this episode. Talk soon. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. Through this podcast, I'm on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship as conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters, both new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by T&K Hunting Gear. If you haven't heard about T&K, then it's about time you do. I've been using T&K gear out in the field and on hunts and have fallen in love with their stuff. T&K is veteran-owned and 100% made in America using only American-made products. All their gear is covered under a lifetime warranty with no questions asked. If it breaks or fails, they will fix it or replace it for free. T&K is your resource for bino harnesses, bow slings, and a lot more amazing gear. For more information about T&K hunting gear, go to tnkhunting.com or search for them on Facebook and Instagram. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Freedom on and stay soulful. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by the Crazy Elk Company. Based out of the state of Washington with products made in America, they are providing solutions with gear to problems you didn't even know you had. Their tag wallet is one of those solutions, and I had the pleasure of using it on all of my hunts this last year, and it is now a mainstay in my kill kit. The tag wallet is a water-resistant zippered pouch that comes with its own reusable zip ties to safely and securely store your notch tag for quick and easy access. For more information, go to crazyelkcompany.com and use the code SOULFUL with a capital S to save 20% at checkout. Be blessed, everyone, and as always, stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and tonight I am joined by just an absolute hero and the man in the hunting world. And if you've never heard of Robbie Kroger or Blood Origins or have even gotten a chance to meet him in person, he is everything that he is, that you see on social media in person. And I am honored to call him a friend. I'm honored to call him a brother in arms, to protect hunting, to make sure it lasts for generations to come. Robbie, thank you so much for joining me for an episode, man.
Thank you, Johnny Mack. And I appreciate that. I'm shaking my head at that introduction. Nobody should know who I am. Nobody should know who Robbie Kroger is. Everyone should everyone should know Blood Origins. That's true. But nobody should know who I am. I'm just the guy who's putting his shoulder behind the stone that moves it every day.
Well, and that is very important, and I want to acknowledge you for who you are and all that. So first and foremost, thank you, Robbie. Really appreciate it. For all the listeners who have never heard of Blood Origins, give a little rundown on what it is, because I know that 2020 was a huge year for you guys because you launched your nonprofit. Give a little rundown so we can catch all the listeners up on what Blood Origins is.
Yeah, super simple. Blood Origins has been around for about 4.5 years now, and really it's turned into, as you said, a non-profit last year. We turned it over so that we could essentially support ourselves. Blood Origins took a stance from the get-go, which is very counterintuitive in the outdoor hunting space, that we weren't going to accept any monies from any brands, because as soon as we did, we would belong to that brand. And Blood Origins doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to everyone. It belongs to every single one, every single hunter that's in our community. And so essentially what Blood Origins does on a daily basis is we convey the truth about hunters and hunting. And we do that through various means. We have a podcast. We tell people stories. So our content is not geared for hunters. Our content is geared for non-hunters. But obviously, it ties in with the hunting community. A lot of hunters get it. A lot of hunters take a lot from it, and that's great. And so the typical non-hunter doesn't actually know a hunter. They don't understand who hunters are. They've never met a hunter. And so we try every 3 weeks or so to introduce them to a hunter through the way that we tell stories. And then we throw in facts, and we throw in different emotions, and we throw in all sorts of things that are very, I would say, unique to the hunting community. The way that we portray who we are, the way that we talk, the way that we interact. I've heard us referred to as gentlemanly when we interact with people. We don't yell, we don't scream, we don't cuss. Cody cusses on the podcast. I don't cuss very much on the podcast. But you're not going to see us get all riled up at someone when they call us an MFer, or they call us a killer, or you just, you abuse animals and whatnot. Rather, we just approach them like a typical conversation and dialogue. And we've seen people starting to act the same way. And so, it's 2020 was a huge year for us. We launched, we put a bunch of projects in the ground that I'm sure we'll talk about. 2021 has already come out the gates flying. We funded a bunch of projects already. We've got a couple of projects in the wings that we're about to announce. That was a long-winded answer to what Blood Origins is.
I love it. What I love is your idea is that inside all of us is this origin of mankind and how we're all connected. And we're all connected, I would imagine, through how you view it as being a hunter-gatherer, correct?
Yeah, some of us are more hunters than gatherers. And I've been accused of being the latter, actually. I have this menace of, I see that you have killed a black bear. And black bear seems to be my nemesis. I have been to Maine for 3 weeks over a span of 5 years. In total, I've hunted 3 weeks. I've sat in a ground blind in a tree stand for about 80 hours in those 3 weeks. And I have seen 3 cubs. And I've yet to kill a bear. And people say to me, Robbie, it's okay. There are hunters in every tribe, and there are gatherers in every tribe. And Robbie, you just so happen to be a gatherer.
I'm sorry to hear that, Robbie. Apparently you're surrounding yourself with the wrong people. Come up to the Northwest. It's $250 for out-of-state black bear tag, and I'll take you up in the Cascades, and we'll put you on some black bears. How about that?
Well, I've got a better plan. In 2022, I planned, because Canada will be open, cross our fingers, I plan to go black bear hunting in Canada so that I see 30 bears and pick my bear that I want out.
There you go. Well, if the border's not open by then, we can put you on something.
it is.
Yeah, there it is. I love it. One of the coolest things I really admire about what you're doing with Blood Origins is that you're not just taking a stance for American hunters. You're taking a stance for hunters in the world, a broad general stance. And so often we, as a part of society, we like to segregate, right? Like, Republicans here, Democrats here, hunters here, non-hunters here, rifle hunters, bow hunters, It's like, how many other categories can we put ourselves in to segregate and remove ourselves from wanting to interact in a healthy, loving manner with mankind? And so what Blood Origins is to me is the first group that is truly taking a humanistic approach of loving people through a whole world view of hunting, not just North American model of wildlife conservation or, the borders of the United States, or whatever this is. You go on your website, bloodorigins.org, and you can see the different projects you're funding in different countries.
Mm-hmm.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's funny. Our fingerprint, sort of our digital fingerprint, is about 50-50. 50 US, Canada, and 50% the world. I think we've had like 35 or 38 countries that have either downloaded our podcast or downloaded our stuff, whatever. There's just a lot of interest around the world that we're tapping into. So we've built these little affiliates. We've called them pods, essentially. We've got these pods and work groups in Australia, in Namibia, in South Africa, in Spain, and in Finland. Those are the 5 pods that we've started right now. We're going to start Blood Origins Canada here soon, and then we'll figure out who's next after that, maybe the UK. And what these pods represent is sort of this new thinking around hunting and communicating and interacting. So like the Australian pod it's like 3,600 people already. And it's a work group. So it's a private sort of group. And you place content into that group and people interact and discuss, and they have an opportunity to do. And we sort of moderate it, like, hey, this is for discussion purposes. You're allowed to discuss, and you're allowed to have different opinions, but you're not allowed to fight. That's not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's also a place for people to put their content so that people can pick it up and place it into their own communities and touch non-hunters. And it's really working very, very well. It's obviously not as fast as I want it to go, but yeah, it's really working. The global fingerprint of, and I think a lot of people in America, are interested, especially hunters, are like, oh, what's happening in Africa? Oh, what's happening in New Zealand? Oh, is it going to be Tarmageddon again this year? And people are sort of educating themselves of global issues around hunting. And it's not just, Americans getting, lambasted left, right, and center with policy and legislation, but the UK, Spain just lost hunting privileges on all their national parks in Spain, in which the government is now paying contractors to go in and cull animals on national parks instead of generating revenue from hunters hunting in national parks, and the knock-on effects of how that affects hoteliers and gas stations and bakers and butchers. And that's happening in Spain right now. Sounds like America. It's just there's those kinds of things are happening all over, and I think it's just a matter of bringing the world, the attention that it deserves, and letting people know about it.
I think it's fascinating. And then when you talk about national parks, obviously us in America who have not traveled outside, or even the concept of traveling with firearms across, flying with them or whatever. When you're talking national park, do you mean like a Yellowstone National Park, or do you mean just a public lands that's been reserved for the people?
Both.
Yeah.
They have both connotations and different. Just like here, national parks are have different designated uses, and so the same thing happens all over the world. You just may not hear about it, that there's different designated uses. So the national parks in Spain specifically used to allow hunting, used to have very good wildlife management protocols in them, and those have been taken away through the sort of anti-hunting lobby. And the video that we pushed out like 2 weeks ago was, it's almost the silence is deafening from the anti-hunting majority when they won, quote unquote, the removal of hunting, but they're silent to the fact that actually more animals are dying now through the culling process in a more stressful manner because they're getting herded, getting put into chutes, and essentially bolt euthanized like they would euthanize cattle. But there's no uproar because they've turned their backs and the work is done because hunting has been banned.
Right. They're, it's a means to an end, right? They're okay with the means to the end as long as hunters don't get to do their part in the continuation. What are some of the strongest talking points that you've gathered over the last 5 years of doing your project that you could say, okay, for those hunters, and I truly believe that every hunter is an ambassador and an advocate for hunting. So you have to constantly inwardly evaluate how you represent yourself and represent what you do and what you love so that it is not just stripped away and constantly attacked. With that being said, what are some of the maybe, I don't know, top 5 bullet points or some major talking points that you can give people to say, okay, these are the things that you want to talk to or talk about in order to diffuse or eliminate constant pressure against anti-hunters or even, and more importantly, the non-hunter?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I had a CEO ask me the same question. And my response was this. I think number one is acknowledgement. Sometimes you just got to acknowledge, that happens. I.e., I think the biggest one is you've used the phrase, I've used the phrase, hunting is conservation. Hunting is not conservation. The consequence of hunting is conservation. Okay? There is links between hunting as an action and conservation as a consequence. But nobody, very rarely, unless you're going after an invasive species or something like that, are you actually hunting for conservation. So when someone says that's not true, you can say that, yeah, you're true. You're right. That's not true. It's okay to acknowledge that. Okay, number one. Number two is the rhetoric that is hunting has led to species declines and species extinctions in the world. That rhetoric is typically tied to the whole passenger pigeon, bison kind of scenario. There is no species that is anywhere close to extinction under regulated hunting on the planet. On the contrary, there's probably a dozen examples of species that are skyrocketing from a population perspective because of hunting. White-tailed deer, 300,000 in 1930, 30 million today. Elk, 100,000 to 1 million. Same with antelope. Same with turkeys. Same with most of your waterfowl species. Markhor in Pakistan went from 300 animals to 3,500 animals. Wildlife in general in South Africa went from about 500,000 head of wildlife in the 1970s to 26 million head of wildlife today. Why? Because of the value that those animals brought to hunting. Okay? 3, what is the number one threat for wildlife on the planet?
Loss of habitat?
Correct. Number one threat for wildlife is loss of habitat. Number 2 is not hunting. Number 3 is not hunting. So when somebody says, again, the causes of wildlife declines, hunting is not even anywhere near the top. Counterintuitively, using Africa as an example, and you can actually use America as an example, I just don't have the statistics in America. In Africa, 1.5 square miles of habitat is protected by hunting outfits. That's double the area that's actually conserved by national parks in Africa. So if the number one threat for wildlife loss in the world is habitat loss, and hunting is doubling the amount of habitat being conserved in Africa, something is going on.
Right.
Put those two things together.
There's a disconnect happening.
There's a massive disconnect happening. All right, so that's 3 points. And again, number 4, I would say is just, I guess, again, acknowledgement that someone says, "Oh, I would never hunt a lion, or I'd never hunt a rhino, I'd never hunt an elephant." And African examples are really easy because they're the big, I'd never hunt a bear, I'd never hunt a cougar. You say, well, I get it. I can see that. I can see why someone would say that. And sort of cross the ground and meet them in the middle instead of just completely being, completely defensive and saying, "Oh, you don't understand. You have no idea what you're talking about."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is your take on trapping? Because we talk a lot about hunting, but rarely do we do. I feel like trapping is like the redheaded stepchild of the hunting world, and
Well, it's the lowest barrier of entry for the antes in terms of sort of death by 1,000 cuts, if you want to call it.
mm-hmm.
If you really want an education about trapping, you need a podcast with a guy called John Hastings, or David Hastings.
I'm writing this down right now.
I think it's Dave Hastings. Hold on, let me check quickly. He is the president of the Furbearers Association of America. Dave Hastings, correct. Dave Hastings. He is phenomenal. He is incredibly intellectual, holds a conversation very well. And what you'll find with Dave is that he's got all the research and all the science that backs up what they do from a trapping perspective. And unfortunately, trapping is almost stuck because nobody's done any educating to the non-hunting majority about what trapping is, how ethical trapping is, how humane trapping is. Because the mindset of people in terms of trapping is stuck in the 1960s with these huge leg hole traps that have massive teeth, that have no swivels, that cause massive damage. And what you find is, through Dave and his research, that there's a lot of best management practices that have gone into traps, and they've done a bunch of science to determine what traps work the best and are the most humane, that are the most lethal. I was like, whoa, I didn't know that you had done all this science to determine how to make a trap more lethal, i.e., if a conifer bear is going to kill a beaver, you want it to die within 30 seconds to 60 seconds, done.
Right.
And they've done the science on that.
But it's never talked about. You don't hear this talked mainstream.
Yeah. So I have no problem with trapping. Trapping has caused unknown to a lot of people. Trapping is why we have so much wildlife proliferating in America today, because you have to live trap something to catch it, to move it.
Right.
So, and done in there are obviously bad apples in every bunch. There's bad apples in hunting ranks. There's bad apples in trapping ranks. There's bad apples in everything. And unfortunately, bad apples have a much louder voice and receive a much larger focus than the people that are doing good. But the majority of trappers check their lines every 24 hours, do it as humanely as they possibly can. If they trap the wrong species because of the swivels and the way that the traps are offset, they can release that animal and without any harm to that animal.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things in the trapping world that are just misnomers that obviously have a bad rap.
I got my trapper's license this last year. I tried my hand at it here in the state of Washington. Bobcat was like top on my list. That is what I was setting out to try to trap. And I don't use the word try very often because it's either do or do not, but I really had no idea what I was doing. I was going to just go trial by fire. And I had multiple cats come in front of my cage because I set a game camera out there. I wanted to see what was happening. Never got one to go in. Caught a few possums, but that was about it.
It's tough, man. It's a science, man. It's an art.
Yes.
It's not a science.
Yes. Okay, Robbie, I have a question for you, and I was going to do this as a solo episode podcast that I was going to do, but I actually believe that you might be one of the coolest people to talk about in regards to this. I've really been diving into the concept of hunting, and people always use the term trophy hunting all the time. So if you take that and you work backwards, like what is the trophy? And a lot of people will be like, well, a trophy is anything, like it's your reward. But based off of the definitions, to earn a trophy means you have to play a game. And to play a game, you have to follow rules. And to follow rules means that there's someone creating the rules. Therefore, if you're playing in the game, lineage of thought means that you then earn a trophy if you end up being a winner of the game. And so then a lot of people are like, well, I don't like the concept of trophy hunting, or I don't believe in it, or yada yada. I'm like, okay, well, if you remove the term trophy hunting, now you're talking about just hunting in general. And if you don't have rules to the game, then what do you hunt by? And then are we talking ethics? And then at what point does it actually mean ethics versus morality versus legality versus ethical or non-ethical? Are you following a little bit what I'm putting down right there?
No, you're rambling.
Oh, Robbie.
But no, I get what you're saying. I would disagree with you in that, for instance, if I'm going out and I know that I'm going to take my boys hunting and we're going to shoot a doe today. What kind of hunting is that?
I don't know.
It's not trophy hunting.
Well, what type of hunting is it? What is your definition of hunting, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I'm going hunting because I know that I want to take an animal because I want meat in the freezer.
Okay.
All right, so you could call it's not subsistence hunting because I don't need it to survive, but in some sort of fashion, some gradient of it is subsistence hunting. Okay, so then I decide I want to step up and I want to take a buck now. I don't want to take a doe. So what level of buck do I want to take? Well, that's, to me, management hunting. Or when you step up into the African world or a big elk or whatever, then to me, the word trophy has been bastardized essentially because of the connotation of sport. Like you just mentioned, there's rules and it's a game and you win. And this idea of winning is you defeating an animal and killing it. And I would say that, yes, when you hunt, it is by definition a endeavor by which you are searching and chasing, and the fulfillment of the activity is the death of an animal, and we should never shy away from that. It is the finality of the thing that we do. It is the finality of purpose. But the idea that it is a game is, it almost, I would say the use of the word game bastardizes the endeavor. Because the endeavor to me is much more than a game. The endeavor is something that, enriches your soul, dare I say.
Correct.
It enriches your mental state of being, your physical state of being, tests you. And at the end of the day, it tests your ability to take a very clean, ethical shot when the time comes and be able to take that animal that you have chosen. And I use chosen very specifically because to me, you're not trophy hunting, you're selective hunting. And so you're selecting an animal based on preference that is tied to who you are. You may prefer an old animal. Old animal doesn't necessarily have to have the biggest antlers, but sometimes, more often than not, the oldest animal, like sheep, the oldest animal will tend to have the biggest horns. Okay.
So let's tie it into produce here. Some people prefer to pick their fruit before it's ripe. That way they're going to sit on it for a while before they consume it. Some people want to, when they purchase their fruit at a grocery store, choose the ripest stuff. And then some people like the bargain discount of going for a little bit on the other end. So it's all about in your purpose of what you're using it for.
I guess I would never use produce as an analogy of taking an animal. But
But why, Robbie? If it's all food, if we're all consuming it, where is the delineation on that?
well, because fruit doesn't bleed. Fruit doesn't. There's no life in fruit.
But there is. But there is
No,
life in fruit.
negative.
You would say that like there's no soul or no blood. And this is the blood origin.
There is no there's no tangible life that God has breathed into that fruit.
Ah, so the breath of life is
Yeah,
is your
there
is
is
your
there is
definition of it.
yeah. I guess I've never really tried to explain the difference between the life of a fruit and a life of an animal.
Well,
Um,
and I'm not. Once again, I'm in the discussion. I am diving into
sure.
this is Soulful Hunter, man. I want to know and understand completely the hunting realm, the hunting ideology, the why we do
Yeah.
everything that we do. And I know that when I pull an apple off a tree, it no longer has the ability to grow. When I pull a carrot out of the ground, same difference. I also believe, and I've seen science that says, when you talk positively to these, what you would consider non living things, they respond in a healthy manner and end up producing more fruit and all sorts of different stuff. So, are you talking about the differences just because it has a heart, has lungs, and has the breath of what we'd consider God in it?
Yeah, it has a vertebrate, it has a brain, it has nerves, it has all the things that connotate life that as we know it.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to the whole game, so are a lot of states doing a disservice to hunting by calling it a fish and game department?
No, because no, absolutely not, because um, the game that you're referring to is not tied to game. Honestly, game. Now I've got to remember why. I'm going to quickly Google it because there is a reason why wildlife is called game, and it's not tied to it being a game. I'm
I
going to because
and I don't know
okay.
exactly what you if you have these conversations a lot, but I'm not trying to be devil's advocate. I want to be more
No. I like
grounded.
it a
I
lot.
want
I
to be
like
more
it a
grounded
lot.
in my thinking so that I can speak clearly and articulate
Yeah, and I don't know
hunting.
why. There's some states that are wildlife and fisheries departments. Some are game and fish. Some are, you know, I don't know why they chose game. And here, just quickly, game seems to indicate two different things. It's either in the gastronomy world, it's the flesh of a wild animal or bird. So that's what they call game, the gaminess, right,
Hmm.
of that flesh. But another way that they've also talked is hunted for sport. Game animals, game birds are the ones hunted for sport. So you've got these two definitions of why they're called game. So one ties to the idea of what you're suggesting, sport and game, and the other one ties in with the um, sort of culinary gastronomic aspect of wild venison and birds being, you know, gamey.
Hmm. Interesting. There is. Do you believe that? And I'm gonna assume that you do. But do you believe that hunting and trapping and fishing should be taught in public education in America?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other side is teaching the other ways. I've seen, HSUS sending DVDs about animal rights to, you're in the education system, um, sending DVDs to teachers And on a rainy day, they can't go outside. Oh, here's a DVD. I'll just pop it in the DVD player and let the school kids watch it. So I know I'd love to see it. I'd love to see butchering classes, all those kinds of things. The things that, unfortunately, we may need one day in society when society crashes, but it may not be anytime soon.
I took my brother out hunting for the very first time, like us doing an extended hunt, and him and I it was our very first turkey hunt, spring turkey hunt ever. He's never even hunted turkeys. I've never hunted them in the springtime, and so we're out there trying to figure it out, doing what we do. And he, we saw turkeys, we never got close to shooting any. And I was talking to him, I was like, what'd you think of this experience? And he was like, I was really blown away at how nature seems to not have any concern other than just doing what it does. Animals, trees, they don't concern themselves with like, how am I going to find water? How am I going to find the next meal? All this, they just do. And he was like, it's sad because us as the human beings have removed ourselves so far from the ability to just provide ourselves with what we need daily. For example, if you didn't have, maybe you had a weapon or you didn't have a weapon. But if you were like, okay, I need something besides protein. If berries weren't in season, would you know what forage to eat? And do you know how to survive on your own? And his perspective is that humanity has just removed itself so far from just knowing how to be who we are in this earth and in this environment without any other crutch to lean upon.
No doubt. The disconnectedness is quite unbelievable, right? And so that's why when we sit down to have a meal with my boys, we're eating whatever we pulled out the freezer that day, and it's something that I've killed, and I'll say to the boys, I said, what are you eating? And they'll be like, we're eating pig tonight. And I said, where'd the pig come from? Oh, you killed it, Dad. So that they know exactly where that food comes from, so that they know that there is some sort of connection between what this thing is that I'm eating and where it came from.
Yeah. It's sad to say, it's missing. It's missing.
It's only going to get worse.
So what are we doing to stop it? Like, at what point does it reach a precipice like a zit that just needs to be popped? And you're like, okay, we got to get rid of this zit. At what point does humanity, I don't want to use the term reset, but like have a realization of grounding themselves into what is really important?
Well, just look what happened the last year and a half.
Yeah.
That you need something like that. That's why license sales in Michigan are up 62%.
Yeah, saw more
fishing license sales in Massachusetts up 56%. Why? All of a sudden, people are realizing, oh, no meat in the stores. Where can I get meat? Oh, I can go fish. Oh, okay. I can go hunt. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's going to need something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe something worse. Who knows,
It's so interesting. You probably have conversations like this all the time. You're just diving into these. I don't know. I feel like as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm like, well, this is what Blood Origins does, right?
Every day, every single day.
Does it get exhausting?
Across multiple social media platforms, across multiple DMs.
How exhausting is it?
It's pretty full on.
Yeah.
Some days it's the typical roller coaster. Some days you're like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
And then other days I'm like, what the hell am I doing?
Some days it's
what charge? Why have I taken this charge upon myself? Like, I need to just toss the towel in now.
Yeah.
And be just done with it, man.
Yeah.
Just be done with it. But it's just the good days, the good days outweigh the bad days. And then you do things like, funding Hunters for the Hungry in Wyoming and raising $23,000 through the hunting community for that effort. And then it's like, okay, wow, that was pretty cool. Or, being in South Africa, I just got back from South Africa and seeing the hostel kids eating the meals, eating the meat that we fundraised for 8 months before, and watching them eat the meat, right? And seeing the meat go into their mouths, not just the meat drop, but like, okay, that's making a huge difference. And I got pissed off in South Africa. We went to a classroom and we walked in there and we handed out puzzles and a toothbrush and an eraser. And I was like, that's nothing. Like, that means nothing.
Yeah.
It's going to entertain them for 10 minutes, and then they're going to go back to their lives that are dirt poor.
Mm-hmm.
And we think we've done something by giving them a puzzle and a toothbrush. And so then the guy pointed out, he says, no, I get it. He goes, but look at what you're doing when you feed them. Every day, right? They get rations from the state, then they get meat for like 2 or 3 days a month. These kids are eating meat 2 times a day, every day for the entire month now.
Mm. So let me ask you a question about that, because you that's very interesting. I think an American perspective of Africa is that there's game all over the place. And you're saying a lot of this land is set aside because of hunters, reserved for hunting. So is there a disconnect with locals being able to just go out and hunt for themselves and provide?
In Africa?
Yes.
Okay. So this is another common piece of rhetoric that we get a lot of. Are you just denying the locals to go hunt? Because the foreigners, the big, rich, white people come in and spend a lot of money to hunt. What you're doing is you're putting an ideal, a system that is American on a place like Africa that may not operate the same way. There is not a single person in the town of, and I'll use Pearston as an example where we feed these kids. There's not a single person in the town of Pearston that would say, I want to go and recreationally hunt. If you go to the rural backyards of Mozambique, someone who says, okay, I need to feed my family, otherwise we don't get anything to eat. That person is hunting for the pot. Mm-hmm. There is no, I'm going hunting because I like to go hunting. Right. Or I like the adventure, or it feeds my soul. There's none of that bullshit there. And I don't say bullshit in any derogatory term. It's just different.
Well, yeah,
right? They're not doing it for. They're not doing it for all the things that we talk about. Why we hunt. They're hunting to survive. And so if someone comes in and says, "Okay, look, instead of you going out every day trying to find something and snaring it, I'm going to bring hunters. They're going to shoot an animal, and I'll give you all the meat. You don't have to go hunt it anymore." Mm-hmm. That guy's going to go, hell yes.
Right.
Because now I can do something else.
Right.
Now I can raise crops, or I can make bracelets, or I can make baskets, and I can generate more income that way. Oh, the other thing is I'm going to give you a job. You can become a tracker with me, or you can become something with me. So now that it's compounded on itself. Mm-hmm. So the idea of you denying someone the right to go hunting, in essence, it's true, but they weren't ever wanting to do that recreationally, number one. And number two, if they were, it was purely from a subsistence perspective that can be mitigated and enhanced by the use of hunting.
Yeah. It's fascinating. You've traveled the world specifically about hunting. You've gotten to see
yeah, you could say that, but not a lot. I've traveled a lot prior to us getting involved with Blood Origins.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've traveled a lot.
Does it change continent to continent? are the reasons why people hunt different? I mean, there's always going to be the sustenance. Like you have to hunt for food. Beyond that, does it change much?
No, it's all the same.
Yeah.
Someone hunting a roebuck in Denmark is doing it because of the camaraderie, of the relationships, of the people they get to meet, and obviously the meat at the end of the day. The people that are going to the tops of the Alps in New Zealand are doing it for the adventure, to test themselves. You know, the people that are going into the back 40 of the Northern Territory of Australia are doing it for the adventure of seeing landscapes that they've never seen before, seeing places that you'd never see if you weren't going there to hunt. Everyone, relationships, adventure, some sort of fulfillment, and obviously on the ground from a food perspective. Those are common denominators, regardless of where you go in the world.
Yeah. Robbie, you shared a little bit about how you got pretty irritated in Africa and you started to get upset thinking about puzzles, toothbrush, stuff like that. What is the heart of Robbie Kroger? Like, what do you want for humanity, or what do you want for this hunting community in which you've taken a stance on and for and with? What's your heart cry out for?
I think we've just got to get along. I think number one, I think we all are. Hunting is so ego driven. It's so primal. It's so, it comes from this sort of instinctual place inside of us from being put there millennia ago kind of deal. And unfortunately, the competitiveness that hunting forces people, as you said, into categories and segregates people and causes a lot of infighting. And if someone just started thinking, if a lot of people just started thinking more about what hunting is and sort of banded together, just like the antis are against us, to me, that would change everything. It's not like we want to create 40 million hunters. It's not what we want. We just want to be recognized and us, band together as the community that we know we are whenever we go hunting together. You take that same spirit of 4 or 5 people going hunting together and blast it across 11 million people, you'd be unstoppable, essentially. So that's really where the heart lies of it, is that just take a post, for instance. Look at a PETA post or a HSUS post. It gets like 100,000 likes, 50,000 shares, 10,000 comments.
Mm-hmm.
You never see a hunting post get that. Why? Like, why does the hunting community never pick up a piece of great content and just like share it like wildfire? The reason is because they feel like if you did it, you would be boosting that person's ego, or that individual, is going to get the acclaim or is going to get the fame or whatnot. I think it's just take it all the way back to frickin' dragging the buck to the side of a fire to the tribe, right? And who's going to get the acclaim of the tribe? The guy that brought the buck.
Yeah.
And the guy that's sitting next to him on the fire is not going to go, look how great he is. He's going to be jealous because he wants to be that guy. He wants to be the one who's going to get all the ladies and get the prime cuts off the animal. And so I think we're going to be battling that forever. And but I think the tide is turning. I think people are changing their narratives. I think people are changing the way that they think. And I've said it on many, many podcasts that the savior of hunting is thinking.
Yeah.
People think about what they post, think about what they say, think about how they interact, think about why they go out and do it in the first place. And all those pieces of thinking is going to, it's going to be great for hunting.
Hunting is great, and it's going to be great for hunting. Powerful, man. If in the Bible it talks about 1 can chase 1,000, but 2 can chase 10,000. Right? There's safety in the multitude of counselors. And when we drop the ego, when we humble ourselves, and we lead with love, anything is possible. And I really believe that a revolution within the hunting world needs to happen for this regard in order for us to reach a further trajectory to protect hunting, the wild places, wild things, and the resources thereof. So
100%.
With that being said, how can people support Blood Origins? How can people get involved and join the cause?
Yeah, the first thing that we would ask people is become a supporter of Blood Origins. And that's very, very simple. It's a way for you to support the content that we generate on a daily basis. And we've partnered with, I think it's now 60 or 65 brands that we give giveaways every month, ranging from right now, the month of May, there is a red stag and a wild boar hunt in Spain that you can win. And all we're asking is for the cost of a cup of coffee a month. $3, $4, $5 a month. Reoccurring, you can do it quarterly, you can do it semi-annually, you can do it annually. We've got all options for everyone. Whatever your heart desires, we've set the minimum at $3. Some people do 10, some people do 50, some people do 100 a month. It's amazing. So that's number one for us, is to be able to continue to do what we do. Is unfortunately we need money and we need support, and we do not take money from brands. We don't champion brands on our platform. We don't say this is the greatest gun, this is the greatest bullet, this is the greatest bow. We don't do that. So that's why we turned ourselves into a nonprofit. Number two, as I've said already, share the content. Our content is your content. Our content is not Robbie Kroger getting famous content. This is our content. And so the more we can share the content, and not just Blood Origins, anyone's content, but use our content however you want to use it. Push the message into your communities, into your non-hunting communities. Those are the two biggest things. If you've got spare $50,000 sitting around, you want to donate it to Blood Origins, to a specific project, come find us. We've got some great projects waiting. If you have a project that you think is worthy of us funding, let us know.
Beautiful. Have you guys ever thought about diving into the educational platform, kind of a counter to what you got done saying?
Negative.
No.
Because there's a lot of people doing it already.
Yeah. Well,
there's no need for us.
As an educator, I could tell you that I would love to have more resources reaching out to me or even being presented to me, because my knowledge of educational resources for hunting and trapping and fishing is limited, at least in the state of Washington, of where I come from. And so any listeners out there, if you have any information, send it our way. I want to, it's our information and we get to disseminate it accordingly. So Robbie, thank you so much, man, for coming on here. You're
welcome. It's way past my bedtime. Just for you.
I apologize, brother. Thank you so much. I look forward to connecting with you again. Listeners, go support Blood Origins. If it touched you or has really impacted your life, go check them out, bloodorigins.org, and you can also find them on all social media platforms. Robbie, always a pleasure, my man. Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you, my brother.
Yes, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Freedom on, and as always, stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you could go ahead and give this a rating as well as subscribe. Also, you can check us out on Instagram under the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Make sure to tag us in pictures and posts and use the hashtag Soulful Hunter. To find out more about the Soulful Hunter Podcast, go to soulfulhunter.com and be sure to follow the podcast, as we are going to be bringing you a lot of great information, insight, and changing lives through primal adventure. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Stay tuned and stay soulful.